Division Association for 10 years. And the World War II Pacific Marine. It's an honor to have been here. I will now turn it over to Dr. DeMarco. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Tata.
Thank you. I just want to speak for a few minutes as a World War II veteran. I know that today is a very special day. We call it Memorial Day. So I'm just going to speak maybe as long as my legs can hold me up, which is about 5 minutes. Well, let me just begin by saying that across the United States, in every national cemetery, the crowds are gathered, as they are here, to show their love and their patriotism to our country and to our honored dead. And it's an honor for me, as a World War II combat Marine veteran, to share a few encouraging words. I want to begin by saying that Memorial Day is not to be confused with Veterans Day. Memorial Day is a day of remembering the men and women who died while serving our country, while Veterans Day celebrates the service of all of our United States military veterans. Many of us, well, I don't know about the younger generation, but when I say many of us, at least in my generation, go all the way back to our school days. Because back then, in our elementary, junior high, and senior high schools, we would remember the men and the women who died while serving our country, while Veterans Day celebrates the service of all United States military veterans. So we understood that. But they took us all the way back to the Revolutionary War, way back in history, where thousands of our soldiers gave their lives for freedom. Freedom against the British, who kept us under their, what would you call it today, under suppression. But nevertheless, you know the history story about the flowers that were placed on the graves of the veterans who had died during the Revolutionary War. And it continued during the Civil War, when many of the survivors would place flowers on the graves of the honored dead. So that part of it we knew and we understood. But it was known as Decoration Day when I was growing up. And that was changed, as many of you know, when was it, 1969, Congress changed it to a 3-day weekend. And so here we are on Monday celebrating the 30th, well, used to celebrate on the 30th day of May. But having said that, a little more personal, I was 16 years old when I heard the news on the radio about what happened in Pearl Harbor on December the 7th. President Roosevelt was our president, made a great speech to Congress declaring war against the Japanese imperial forces that had bombed Pearl Harbor. Now, at that time, our country was unified. Millions joined the military to fight. Millions supported those of us who were fighting by working in factories and wherever they were working. The men, the women, everyone worked together to support the effort and to win the war in Europe and in the South Pacific. Now, I read about the Marines and how they were all shipped out into the Pacific, part of the Navy, and they were fighting there in Guadalcanal at that time. And I had read the heroic stories of the Sergeant Basilone of New Jersey, and reading that, I said, you know, when I'm old enough, I'm going to join the Marines, and I want to do my part in winning the war. So that was only 16 years of age. What did I know of what was going to happen? But nevertheless, I kept my promise that I would join the Marines. So when I graduated from high school, I joined and went to Parris Island in South Carolina for basic training. And from there, we all went up to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina for further training. Well, they asked me, well, I shouldn't say that word. They sent me to the 60 millimeter mortar school to learn how to operate 60 millimeter mortars. So that was my assignment that they gave me, learned it well, and within a few weeks, all of us got on board in Norfolk, Virginia, in the middle of the night, probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, so no one would see the Marines getting on board the ship that was going to be going down towards the Panama Canal. And of course, we didn't know where we were going until we passed Cuba. And then one of the old salty Marines who had been in the Marines for a long time said, I know where we are. He said, we're off the coast of Cuba, and we're heading for the Panama Canal. We're going to Pearl Harbor. Well, that was kind of shocking, but nevertheless, we, most of us slept on board of the ship. We didn't go down into the holds to sleep. And so we went all the way down to Panama Canal, went through there. He gave us about 2 days to shake off our legs. They gave us plenty of beer, plenty of cigarettes while we were on land, and then boarded the ship again, got on board, got to Pearl Harbor. Well, that was a different way of living, and to see the ships and to see where things were happening just a year or so before. And nevertheless, we were shipped off to take the place of all the men who were killed at Tarawa. Now, some of you may not be too familiar with the South Pacific battles, but the Marines went from one island to another, making our way up towards Japan. And they had been to Guadalcanal, then they went to Tarawa, and after Tarawa, there was a rabbi who spoke at the cemetery on Tarawa. And if I wrote his name down here somewhere, I'll tell you what he said. Yes, the rabbi's name was Roland Gittleson. And here's what he said at the temporary cemetery at Tarawa. Somewhere in this plot of ground, there may lie the man who could have discovered the cure for cancer. Under one of these Christian crosses, and underneath a Jewish Star of David, there may rest now a man who was destined to be a great prophet, or a discoverer, or an inventor, to find a way, perhaps, for all to live in plenty, with poverty and hardship for none. That's what he said at the cemetery at that time. Now, I was one of the many Marines who replaced those young men who died in Tarawa. It was June of 1944, the same month as the Normandy invasion in Europe, when I and hundreds of other Marines climbed down the rope ladder into the Higgins boats and headed for the designated Red Beach on Saipan. The Marines had established the beachhead, and I was among them, prepared as a 60 millimeter mortarman to do my job, and I did it. Now, more Marines were wounded and killed on Saipan than any other island in the South Pacific. And the Navy corpsmen saved many lives, and field hospitals were temporarily set up, and a place on the ground used as a cemetery for the honored dead. I was there. I lived it. That I was one who returned home safely, was able to go to college to become a minister and an educator. And in retirement, I was appointed to 2nd Marine Division Association national chaplain. In many honored fields across Europe, there are many buried under the Star of David and Christian crosses for our fallen comrades. Their sacrifice is not forgotten, and their names, though lost to us, are written in the books of God. It was Abraham Lincoln who said in the Gettysburg Address that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead should not have died in vain. It all goes back to 1776, when the signers of the Declaration of Independence listed all their grievances against the rule of King George III. With the Declaration of Independence, knowing the Revolutionary War would take many lives. And remember the last few words of that document, the Declaration of Independence? Here's what it read. And for the support of this declaration that refers to our country, and with a firm reliance on the divine protection of providence that refers to God, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. What were they saying? It's all about God, country, and we the people. There are many heroes. And here's a poem. In closing, I'd like to read this poem. It's called You Are Not Forgotten. We hear the bugler play for another one of the fallen, one among the many who sacrificed their lives for the good of peace and freedom. They are the young soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. They are the ones who have fought for we the people. They are the ones who have given their all so that we can be here today. They lie in fields of honor. Their bodies lie in honored glory. And may their souls rest upon the firmament of heaven in God's eternal embrace. And with that, my legs are getting weak, so I close with these words. Thank you for sharing my thoughts with you Memorial Day. Again, thank you. God bless you. Amen.